Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a Pinot Noir from Central Otago. This is Domaine Rewa's 2020 Pinot Noir, and this is an organic wine from a sort of a tiny, perfectly formed little estate run by a Kiwi and her French potter husband in the Pisa flats. So the property that is now Domaine Rewa was actually planted in 1997 and 1998 by Joan and Tony Lawrence. They called it Arum Wines. The vineyard sits on the 45th parallel, and its first vintage was in 2001. Subsequently, the Lawrences developed another vineyard, Te Wairere, which is near Cromwell, and that became their home block. And actually they were forced to sell the vineyard on the 45th parallel in 2009. So when the current owner, Phillippa Fourbet, discovered that this property was for sale, she very quickly decided that this was the way that she could achieve her dream of bringing her family back to New Zealand, making their living through a business based in agriculture and that fitted with her love of food and wine. And thus, within 4 days, they'd bought the vineyard. Now, Philippa is a New Zealander, and she met her husband, a Frenchman, Yannick Foubert, when she was working in London in the finance industry. Yannick was the proprietor of a company called Le Chêne Vert, based in Anduze, down in southern France. And evidently Philippa was originally drawn to the high-quality artisanal horticultural pots that his company produced, but they very quickly fell in love, married and started a family. So today Yannick crafts his pots. Actually, he has a pottery studio in the vineyard, Domaine Rewa on the Pisa flats, and in fact the estate does make a Pinot Gris that ferments at least partially in 350 litre amphora, which Yannick makes on the property. This is a 5.5 hectare estate. It's also planted to Chardonnay, Pinot Gris and Riesling, although Pinot Noir is the predominant grape variety here. And the vines mostly surround the house and the pottery, rising up quite a gentle slope from the Cromwell to Ludgate Road, with the highest point being a terrace, which is where they grow their Riesling. The soils here are free draining, glacial and fluvial rock, which manifests itself as gravels, sand and silt. Now, these soils are particularly suited to grape growing as they're low in fertility but have a very high mineral content. When Philippa and Yannick changed the estate's name to Domaine Rewa, this was in honour of Philippa's maternal grandmother, although actually there is also a tree called the Rewa, which is New Zealand's equivalent of a honeysuckle. Evidently its flowers are very attractive to bees, and this fits in really nicely with their ideas of biodiversity. So these are organic single vineyard wines, and since 2013 they've been certified by the BioGrow organisation. The vineyards are also tended using some biodynamic practices. In fact, since the outset in 1997, when the Lawrences ran the estate, it's always been farmed organically, sustainably, and with an environmentally aware approach. And Philippa and Yannick have continued this approach. For instance, they keep bees on the property, and since they took over ownership, they've planted over 500 trees. Their approach includes composting all the mower that comes from the winery and any cuttings, along with local straw, and putting that back onto the vineyard. The clones of Pinot Noir that were planted here, I guess, are pretty typical of the sort of clones that were being planted around 1997. The first listed is Davis Clone 5. The others are Dijon clones as 113, 115 and 777. The wine was hand harvested in a single day on the 27th of March 2020. The fruit was destemmed, and fermentation took place in open-topped stainless steel fermenters, where maceration was allowed to continue for 10 to 12 days, with the cap of skins being plunged gently back into the fermenting must to give quite a gentle extraction. Aging took place in French oak barrels. They don't actually specify the size. I would assume probably 225 litre barriques. However, they are very particular in pointing out that 26% of these barrels were new in 2020. The wine stayed in barrel for 12 months and was bottled on the 10th of August 2021. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First of all, looking at the colour, it's quite a vibrant ruby red. It's not losing much colour to the rim, where there's a slight sort of purplish hint. I can see through it very, very easily. It's a relatively dark ruby, but it's not particularly deep. Swirling it here, I've got a nice big New World Pinot Noir glass, and I hope that it's going to reveal some lovely aromas. So let's see what we make of those, shall we? Some lovely lifted red fruit. There's almost a depth of ripe red plum, but also some juicy red cherry notes at the top end of the spectrum. Underlying that, there are some touches of spice, and possibly even the first touches of some sort of mushroomy tertiary development. However, what's leading this is a juicy red fruit, primarily red cherries, perhaps even a touch of strawberry. So let's have a taste. The wine is dry with good acidity and really some quite fine tannins showing themselves. At the front of the mouth, where there's good acidity, you've got this sort of juicy red cherry fruit that's interacting with some very fine cedary notes, a hint of cinnamon woven through this lovely juicy red fruit. The wine is probably mid-weight. It's labelled as having 13.5% alcohol, and that's quite nicely in balance with the fruit. It doesn't stand out at all. As I'm talking the sort of richer red fruit, sort of riper red cherry to sort of richer red plum notes are showing on the mid palate, alongside some slight cedary notes, again, sort of just that hint of cinnamon cutting through. The acidity is quite fresh, and the interaction between the acidity and the tannins is giving some mouth-watering hints that are helping to make the red fruit that little bit more juicy. At the moment, the cedary notes in the wine are fairly forward, and I suspect if you were to come back to this wine over the next year or two, you'd find the fruit and the oak starting to come slightly more into balance. The two are very well integrated at the moment, but currently those cedary notes are slightly dominating the end of the finish. However, the acidity is ensuring there are some juicy touches that give good length to the finish. Now, the notes I've seen suggest that a drinking window for this, it should start drinking in 2025 and carry on through to 2032. So I think that suggestion echoes my own thoughts in that the fruit on this is going to open a little more. Looking at the aggregated critic score that's posted up on Wine Searcher, that gives the wine 91 points out of 100. I think 91 to 92 is probably about right. Currently, with it being a little closed, I'd opt for that 91 points. So yes, I think it's a lovely wine. I think maybe leave it in the cellar a little longer, or if you're going to approach it now or in the near future, I would probably give it a bit of time in a decanter just to open up beforehand. If you're interested in trying Domaine Rewa's Pinot Noir, it's worth noting that there were only 8,844 bottles made, so it may not be particularly easy to find. I'll leave a link in the notes to the page on the Wine Searcher website for this vintage of this wine, and that way you can see if it's available in your market and at what price, and what other vintages are available as well. So thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you found the tasting of interest. If you have, do please go ahead and press the like button. That'd be fantastic. If you've been watching my videos and you still haven't subscribed to the channel, could I ask you perhaps to consider doing that? All these are very useful in helping to build the channel. If you have any comments, do please pop them in the comments box below. I'd love to know what you think about the wines I'm looking at, the tastings I'm doing, or anything else that relates to that. And if you have any friends you think might like to watch the video as well, it would be fantastic if you could share it with them. So thank you once again for watching, and I do hope that maybe you'll find some time in the very near future to come and join me for another video tasting. But until then, bye for now.